Welcome back. Using humor to educate viewers about health and the human body, physical therapist Adrian Miranda created Gross Anatomy. The web series follows a fictional doctor played by Miranda who is tasked with teaching GED students about human anatomy. Today, Adrian Miranda joins me to discuss the series in more detail. Adrian, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks. It's a pleasure.
Now, this was really interesting to see and it's kind of exciting to talk about because you kind of use different parts of your background to create, Gross Anatomy. Can you talk about what inspired you to combine your career in physical therapy with your creative work as an actor and content creator?
Yeah, sure. And thanks a lot for letting me talk about it. So there's two parts. So one part is that the clear one was I was finishing my last semester in physical therapy school. I went to Ithaca College, and I left that classroom, and just like a eureka moment popped up, and I was like, this is information that should be told to the public, and it has to be on television, and I want to be on television. So that was like the moment, and then I was like, but for the next 4 or 5 years, I need to be like really good physical therapist. So I like dedicated like to studying as much as I could. But then when I kind of look back further, the actual, probably the little inspiration that you have as a kid, that little things inspire you don't even have a clue about until you're much older, was that when I was about 7 or 8, my mom had a hip replacement. And she was pretty young for a hip replacement. But I remember the day that my grandmother was taking care of us, my father walks in with my mom, and it was like 2 or 3 days after the surgery. This was in the early 90s. And my father, I hear him tell my grandmother, oh, we can't go back, it's too expensive. And they were referring to physical therapy. So we took turns spending the night in the room with the mom to help her go to the bathroom. And so I think that stuck with me as I was doing my clinicals, I started practicing and being like, these people have good health insurance, but their health insurance isn't covering all of their treatments. Or these people need physical therapy and rehabilitation where they have chronic pain and the health insurance companies aren't providing it. So the idea was, I want to get to people on television, get them at home. At the time I was watching, telenovelas and the news. I know I was like 8 years old watching the news with my parents like that, watching the novelas. And then watching like 90s sitcoms like Fresh Prince of Bel-Air and realizing how powerful television was. Now, when I talk about television back in the day, I mean any screen, which is now our mobile phones and your screen that you watch Netflix on. So those were the two inspirations, was like being a student, coming out and seeing the world of healthcare and how there's a lot of barriers to care. And also when I was a kid, realizing that my family also, my mom limped for 13 years. Wow. For 13 years. And when I graduated physical therapy school, I was like, oh, that's why she limped and had so many problems. And so those are the two different inspirations.
And I'm so glad that you mentioned that because I do think, I agree 100% that television has the power to educate sometimes with misinformation, just for the effect of, just being in Hollywood and entertainment. Sometimes people will say certain things for the story. And so I think it's so important that we do have, series like yours that kind of actually educate people on what's actually happening with their bodies and not, something for a comedic effect or something that we see online. Now, speaking of comedic effect though, you do use comedy to educate people. Can you tell us, why that was important for you to add within the show?
Yeah, so, if you look at the logo, even just the logo itself, right, it's yellow with a little black, stroke, exterior stroke. And I realized that people are having so much pain, right? So it can affect, you have back pain for 20 years, you have a baby, you have a job, you have parents you're taking care of. There's a lot of stress, and it can get you really depressed, right? That's the reality of it. So I said, let me use humor to kind of show that there's like a light, there's hope. So that's why I chose humor. And I think, sometimes humor gets to you quicker and it kind of lets you open up and be vulnerable, right? And so in some of the episodes, I use humor, and then I can give you like a sad moment, like a moment of like reality, right? And it just lets you, I think it opens your vulnerabilities up. You let information in a little bit better. But comedy is really important to me. I think also I just want to be different. And I knew I didn't want to, and don't get me wrong, like I love my drama movies and TV shows, and I'm a huge fan of the dramedy, and that's where my show is kind of inspired, is more dramedy, but comedy was a vehicle to get the message across.
That's cool, and I think that comedy also helps us remember more. And so if you think about like when you were in school, when we did watch tapes that were about, the human body or science, like sometimes they're a little bit harder to remember, but when you think about something that made you laugh, it's easier to remember. So I think that's
Bill Nye the
amazing.
Science Guy was a huge inspiration for me.
Exactly.
Like anything comedy is going to kind of open you up. Like your soul kind of opens up, your brain opens up, it lets things in. It becomes disarming. That's always, and even in the clinic, you know, early in my career, I looked like a baby. Like when I look at pictures now, I'm like, oh my gosh, I look like I was 16, I was 20. I also started practicing pretty young. I was 22 when I got my doctorate, and I was treating patients, and so I had to be very professional. Like it was your shoulder. I didn't want to hear about your kids, didn't want to hear about your job or your bad day. It was shoulder business, and that was done. Now, the research came out showing that, hey, your shoulder problem is this whole conglomerate of things going on your whole life. It's not just the musculoskeletal thing. So I started opening up a bit more, and I had some mentors who were, you know, they were very funny and humorous, and so I saw the patients opening up and just seeing their outcomes improve. So it's just like a holistic being that's important, in my opinion.
Now, what are some topics and themes Gross Anatomy explores? So you could like maybe bring up some memorable episodes, or just like, is it like, oh, episode by episode you focus on a different body part? Like, how do you approach that?
Yeah. So here's the thing. It's about anatomy, but it's about human anatomy. The show itself is about failure. Right? So you have this physical therapist who loses his practice. I'm not going to tell you because that's a season finale, or that's the premise. But
all right, no spoilers.
No spoilers. I'm going to spoil it for you, but because it's exciting. So loses his practice, loses his license. He goes back to school to get a degree in education. He's thinking it's like, oh, it's a piece of cake, right? I have a doctorate already. I'm good. So it turns out that his mother is the dean, and he's failing out, and his mom's about to fail him out. And so this is like his last chance. So in the classroom, it's a bunch of people who failed in some or feel like failures, right? And some people are failures because maybe they made bad choices. Some people are failures because they had no choice. It just happened to them. So I touch on topics of entrepreneurship, touch on topics about immigration. You know, so one of my characters, parents, and he get let back into the country, has the support of 3 brothers. They own a grocery store. And so it's a lot of different topics about, you know, what happens when you fail at something. By choice or not by choice, right? And so it has to do with like relationships, right? My mom is in this show. My real mom, actually, I had to force her to act.
Oh, wow,
yeah,
that's
my real mom.
cool.
So funny story, the night before, she was like, I'm not gonna do this. I walked away, I was like, sure. And I was freaking out. And I just gave her like an hour, and she came back and said, hey, can we practice? And I was like, yes, of course. And so we practiced. That's actually my real mom. But it kind of shows, you know, different relationships of, classmates being supportive and not supportive, right? So one episode, one of the characters, Dan, is getting a shoe deal with the NBA, and for some reason this deal, they're like, you don't even have a high school diploma, you have to get something because
Right.
we're working with millions and millions of dollars. So he's really frustrated, and he just seems like a jerk, but really what he's trying to do is he has this other motive that nobody knows about until he finally blurts it out, right? But then he lies about a little bit of what I lie in the next episode, right? So these are real things, and so I put in, you know, different topics that we all deal with. It's not just about the human musculoskeletal anatomy. It's about like the mental area, mental anatomy, right? What you're dealing with through life. And that's also why I wanted to make a sitcom and not just like, hi, my name's Adrian. I'm going to teach you about your shoulder, like a YouTube or a social media, which there's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
But I knew that to get you to do something about your shoulder or your back pain, I had to relate it to your family member, your kid, your parent, a work stressor, a work thing. Maybe you're an athlete and you or not. Maybe you're a recreational, athlete and you just love pickleball, right? But not doing pickleball gets your mental state not well. So using real character situations, multiple characters, was a way to let me say, hey, there's other things going on in the world. Let me just like sprinkle this in because you might relate to this.
Now, I really want to talk about how Gross Anatomy has entered the musical world. I love musicals, so I thought this was really exciting. Can you talk a little bit more about that journey?
Okay, so all of my performance was by accident. My performance life started by accident. So in college, I went to do martial arts capoeira. I think it was like my end of my freshman year, and I walk into the club, as any college freshman does, walks in, and all of a sudden these 6 people walk in with a boombox, and they did not look like capoeiristas. And I was like, hey, I'm here for capoeira. Like, oh, that ended last year with a breakdance club. So I wasn't gonna leave and be like, oh, never mind, bye. So I just was like, I stayed, they were nice. And so lo and behold, I started breakdancing. And then I found out that, boys at that time danced, and they were in the dance show. Recital's like for kids, but in the dance show in the big school dance company. And I was like, oh, that's a thing. So I auditioned, I got in, and then just had a natural talent. Listen, I played sports growing up. I was okay. I was never great. and I loved sports, but dance kind of just came, and I loved the performance aspect. I was good at it. And so I got involved in breakdance, and I started doing hip hop, and I started doing like jazz and modern contemporary. Then I took a lot of classes. So I started the opposite. Usually people start with like ballet, jazz in class, and they kind of go into breakdance and hip hop. I went the complete opposite. And I didn't take my first class until maybe like senior year of college. And then, so then I graduated, played a lot of soccer, and I didn't dance for like 3 years. I wanted to get back into dancing. Accidentally, I went to an audition that was for a play. I thought it was a dance audition. It was for a play, and so I had to like memorize something. I was like, you know what, let me just try it anyway. And I got a part. And I got another part. And I couldn't sing at all. So I got into a musical, and they gave me a singing part, and I was tone deaf. But because I could dance, I was in the musical, and I guess I could act as well. And then someone came up to me like, hey, you can't sing. And I was like, it was torment. I almost quit. And I took lessons for about 2 years, and I became a singer. And so I went to musical theater. I was in Tommy, Pinball Wizard, and Bernard and West Side Story. And then I was like, oh, this is really fun. And so I wrote my own musical, live musical, the two or three shows based on Gross Anatomy. So me playing all the characters. Think of Tyler Perry. I kind of Tyler Perry route. But I always wanted to be on the screen. And so when I did this web series, I got the 5th episode was a grant from New York City Artist Corps grant. And I said, I'm going to do a musical number in this. And so it just worked out that I had like my love interest enter episode 5 and had the funding. So I was like, I'm going to write a musical about the pelvis. And now it's all connected. That's a song. But yeah, I think, again, musicals are fun.
They're fun.
Know?
I love musicals.
Right?
And I also, just listening to your story, it's very inspiring. I know we're talking about Gross Anatomy, but just to hear that you've really pursued so many of the things that you were interested in, I think is so important. And I love that we're actually having our viewers listen to that, because yeah, you could be like into science or into the human body, but you could also be into the arts, which I think is amazing.
Yeah.
Could you quickly just talk a little bit about the Gross Club? I understand it's a way that people can kind of stay in contact and learn a little bit more.
Not to disappoint you, but it's an experiment.
Oh,
you know how
okay.
there's like Swifties and Believers, so it's just like an idea of like, hey, let's try to create this like little brand of like groupies of a group. So all of you watching, like, let me know what your opinions are, because it's like Gross Anatomy, it's like Anatomists, Anatomies, Grossies, Gross Club, Gross Anatomy Club, I don't know. So whatever you all think at home, let me know, because it's just an experiment. I really wasn't really too serious about it. I was like, yeah, let me just start it now. Maybe one day things will take off, and we'll have to give people names. So that's what Gross Club is.
Okay, well, I want to thank you so much for joining us and sharing, so much about you and the work that you've done with our community. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
If you would like to watch this amazing and educational web series, please go to YouTube and search Gross Anatomy. Stay tuned, we have more open for you right after this.